no entrance music today. My name is Aidan Finn, and welcome to today's webinar on Defending Today's Threats with Tomorrow's Security by Microsoft. So let me introduce myself in case you don't know me. I'm Aidan Finn, and I'm the Technical Sales Lead with MicroWarehouse. MicroWarehouse is a distributor of technologies based in Dublin, Ireland. What's a distributor? It's kind of like a wholesaler. So we sell to resellers who then sell to the customer. So if a business wants to buy some Microsoft software or some data on hardware or whatever, they go to the reseller buys it from us. I'm an MVP, so Microsoft Valuable Professional with the data center expertise. Sorry, what was that, John? John's giving me questions. John is on the background, he's producing, and he is telling me to show you the slides, which I have not done. Excuse me, I am being stupid. It's only the second time we've already done this. Show my screen, and yeah, we should be seeing the screen. Yep, everyone's seeing the screen, hopefully. So I'm a Microsoft Valuable Professional, or MVP, with the Cloud and Data Center expertise, specifically Hyper-V, and done a lot of stuff in Windows Server and System Center in the background. And the last few years I've been spending almost all of my time working in the Azure space. I blog on my own site on aidanfinn.com, and I write for the Petri IT Knowledge Base on petri.com about Microsoft virtualization and cloud technologies. I tweet as @Joe_Elway, and I am also on Facebook as aidanfinn.com. MicroWarehouse, as I said, is a distributor based in Dublin, Ireland, and distributes to Microsoft partners and similar sorts of companies. So obviously Microsoft technologies, but there's solutions as well from companies like Skycake, DataOn, and GridStore. Speaking of, this webinar has been paid for by, not really, but some of the stuff that we do is hardware by the likes of DataOn storage. So if you're interested in certified storage spaces hardware, so you can do more affordable, better performing software-defined storage using commodity hardware, you can do that in a Hyper-V world or a SQL Server world, private cloud, public cloud world, using DataOn's hardware, and drastically reduce the cost of storage and boost your performance. And the appliance I've got highlighted there is the 9112, which is a 2U cluster in a box. So it's an enclosure with 2 independent servers and 12 3.5-inch shared disks with tiered storage between SSD and HDD. So you can get around 35 terabytes of really fast storage inside of that thing, because your blocks are on SSD and on HDD as well. High-end processors, lots of memory, way more than small, medium enterprise or branch office might ever actually need. We also have some hyper-converged infrastructure solutions for Hyper-V. So if you want a HCI solution that's going to work, no knocks on anybody in particular, but if you want a solution that's going to work and reduce the amount of infrastructure, amount of time that's required to deploy a Hyper-V cluster or VDI solutions, dense SQL installations, then GridStore is for you. And MicroWarehouse distributes to resellers all around the European Union. So this is about Microsoft security. And the first thing you probably think is, oh no, not Forefront. No, don't talk about endpoint protection and all that stuff. I'm not going to talk about those things. This is definitely not about Forefront. It's not about firewalls. It's not about anti-malware. That stuff is 1990s. And this webinar is about getting you to consider using modern solutions and modern techniques to defeat and to block the attacks that are happening today. The attacks that are beating your firewall, that are beating your anti-malware. So in the past, Microsoft did have Forefront, and they admitted, you know what, there are other people doing this stuff better than us, so we'll let them do their thing. And Microsoft didn't just give up. What they did was they looked at what's happening in this industry, and being one of the most attacked companies in the world, they had a pretty unique perspective on what's going on in IT security. So they went out and acquired mature solutions that are out there that are dealing with the way we're being attacked by professional attackers these days, and that are giving us solutions that are modern and protect the solutions that we're using today, not what we were using 25 years ago. So our security challenges have changed. The way we're being attacked every day, that we see in the headlines every day, has changed. The days of the spotty teenager hacking us using Nimda or SQL Blaster from some basement in South Korea, those days are over. Attacks are much more professional now. We have to realize that. We have to say, okay, firewall, anti-malware, they're important, but they're not the be-all and end-all. In fact, they don't even block the sorts of attacks that we're seeing today. And we can see that in a lot of the statistics that are out there. So I saw some interesting reports in the last few weeks. We're talking about the trends in security vulnerabilities and breaches in the last few years. And some of it was pretty scary. Now, the numbers that I'm focusing on in this webinar are for mainly the small medium enterprise, because a lot of SMEs out there think they're immune to these sort of attacks. They think, you know what, everyone's going to attack, Al Jazeera and Citibank and those guys because they got money. You know what, small medium enterprise has money too, and it's easier to attack because it hasn't invested in security. And there's a lot of them out there to attack, and they don't have the skills, the means, the wherewithal to protect themselves. So these organizations are going after them. What we know about these different attacks is the first 48 hours are critical. We have to be able to detect when that malware or that attack actually comes in, because a lot of the time it's not even malware. We have to analyze it, and then we have to remediate it. Interesting thing is, it typically takes 200 days to discover a cyber breach. 200 days. The attacker has been and gone, or has been living in there for a very long time, making a lot of money from you in that 200 days. It takes 70 days to contain a malicious insider. That's an employee of the company attacking their employer. 70 days to contain them. 74% of UK small medium enterprises were breached in 2015. Now, the small medium enterprise in the UK is no different than it is in Germany, the US, France, Ireland, wherever. Same sorts of organizations, same headcounts. So you're talking about up to 250 employees. 74% of those companies were breached. 60% of those breaches only took minutes to happen, and then took 200 days to discover. Now, the interesting, you think about that, 60% of compromises just took minutes. So it wasn't someone there going, scan firewalls and all that sort of thing and then hack websites and all that malarkey. No, it was actually much easier. And 55% of attacks were carried out by insiders. That's scary. Scary. 55% attacks carried out by insiders, and those insiders took 70 days to discover. The nature of the attacker is different. So we've got the employee, but the people who are out there who are plotting against us, like I said, they aren't teenagers anymore who are bored. They aren't anonymous or any of those organizations. They are professional gangs. They're set up as professional businesses, and their job is to make profit from you. They are parasites, if you want to put it that way. I'd say my website's going to be brought down tomorrow for saying that. But they are effectively parasites, and they're attacking us in all sorts of different ways. So we've got DDoS, cryptoware, phishing, spear phishing, watering holes, zero-day, and then they're selling and auctioning and purchasing vulnerabilities, stolen identity, data on the deep web or darknet. A lot of those terms don't mean anything to you. And if they don't, well, you're vulnerable to a lot of this stuff because you haven't protected you or your customers from these sorts of attacks. These are the things that are going on today because they are the easy way of attacking a business. The top origins of breaches, well, turns out insiders. So third-party supplier who's working inside your network. So whether it's your PBX or a consultant or whatever, 18% of attacks come from them. Staff accidents, 26%. Staff deliberate attacks, 10%. That's a lot of stuff happening there. Organized crime is a quarter of attacks, and malware is only 5%. Yet we put so much time into scanning for malware and thinking that scanning for malware on our firewall and our servers and our PCs is going to protect us. That stuff is only 5% of breaches. So what is being attacked? Well, it turns out identity is the most attacked thing out there. And unfortunately, 75% of individuals out there only use 3 or 4 passwords. I would say it's probably a heck of a lot of them only using 1 or 2 passwords. They're using the same password for work as they are for their personal Hotmail or Gmail account, their bank account, and everything else. And if someone puts a little bit of time into finding out what that person's email address and password is, they're able to access everything that that person has access to. So if you've got single sign-on in the cloud, even if you don't, if we can figure out what your work email address is, I can probably guess that that person is using the same password across all of those different services. Despite every procedure, every policy, every piece of education, people are lazy, and they will use as few passwords as possible. Now you might say, hey, I use a password manager. I'm really careful about that. That's because you're smart. Think about your users, your customers. They're not nearly as smart as you. 60% of all network intrusions are traced back to credentials because it's the easy way to attack. All I need is to get you to give me your username and password so I can do some phishing or some spear phishing. I want to attack your company. I'm going to send some sort of email to you to get you to reset your password on Facebook. And I will set up a page that looks like Facebook with a URL that looks very similar to Facebook. I can send that to every employee in your company. There's a good chance one of them thinks they need to reset their Facebook password and will click on that link and give away company secrets. Unfortunately, passwords sometimes are way too easy to guess. If you go and do a search to see what the top passwords are of 2015, you're going to see things like password 123, monkey, dragon, and all that stuff. Then you might say, you know what, I'm going to put in complex password policies. The more complex you make that password policy, the more guessable that password's going to be. Uppercase, lowercase, numbers, special characters, all that stuff just does not help. What actually helps is simplicity and long, because that makes it computationally difficult to actually guess or brute force, and it is more cryptographically strong. And if you start using the concept of a passphrase, simple sentence that someone is able to type and they only have to change maybe once a year, that stuff is cryptographically strong and protects the business and is good. But that's not enough. User education is not enough because people, well, the number one rule in the 8 and Fin IT Bible is users are stupid. And number 3 is actually users are lazy. Number 2 is actually users lie. No matter what education you do, it's just not going to be enough. And the various reports out there that talk about all these statistics say that user education was found to be not enough. What we actually need to do is start protecting identity. It's a company asset, and we need to protect it. And we can use a solution like Advanced Threat Analytics, or ATA from Microsoft, which Microsoft acquired a few years ago from one of their many acquisitions in Israel. ATA basically does to identity what credit card detection company or fraud detection companies do for your credit card. They're looking for strange usage patterns. They're looking for stuff being on sale on the darknet. So the way it works is, first off, Microsoft are scanning the darknet. They're looking for auctions of user accounts from your domain. And if they find any, they email you. You get an alert to say, hey, the following accounts were found to be for sale on the darknet. The solution for that is easy. You force a password change on the users and give them a slap on the back of the head and stop them responding from phishing attacks, or at least try to educate them a little bit. But the other thing it does is it's pulling in information from your on-premise network, from your domain controllers, your syslog servers, whatever else, and it's sending that data, and it's just general usage data. There's nothing secret here. It's sending that data to the ATA center, which is basically the Microsoft Cloud, where machine learning and Microsoft's knowledge of your network and all of their customers' networks and their knowledge of trends of attacks on the internet, all that information is being used to analyze the usage on your network. So if it sees strange user patterns, if it sees brute force attacks on an account, if it sees a user constantly trying to access file shares and has no rights to, you start getting alerts. So you're made aware that there's a vulnerability out there and that someone is trying to do stuff with a particular account that they shouldn't be trying to do. ATA is licensed per user, and it's available through multiple different Microsoft licensing channels, so obviously EA, MPSA, and stuff like that. It's also available through Open for small, medium enterprises. Those are all pre-purchase type things, so your usual CapEx expenditure, but it's also available through a channel called CSP. And CSP is a cloud-like model where you pay per user per month for a particular product. So it allows you to go up and down on headcounts and moves away from CapEx to an OpEx model. ATA can be purchased by itself However, we typically recommend that you purchase it as part of something called the Enterprise Mobility Plus Security Suite, which is called EMS. Used to be called Enterprise Mobility Suite. But Microsoft really wants you to focus on the fact that this is actually a security solution. EMS is license per user, with each user having up to 5 devices. Again, various licensing channels like your EA, MPSA, OpenCSP. It includes ATA. It includes something called Azure Rights Management Services, or RMS. We'll come back to that later. It includes a device and application management solution called Intune, and it includes Azure Active Directory Premium. Now, if you want to learn more about EMS, we did a webinar 2 weeks ago called An Introduction to EMS, and you can find a link to that there. If you go onto learn.mwh.ie, you'll find a link to that webinar recording there as well, and we have some handouts and links to some learning stuff on there as well about EMS. One of the big fears out there is third-party SaaS applications. People are using these things, whether they're not supposed to be or not. If the user has internet access, they have access to third-party applications in the cloud. No matter what policies you create, no matter what you ban, no matter what you try to do on a firewall, users will find a way to circumvent what IT is trying to do. Users' natural enemy is IT, and they will do what they can to bypass IT, and this is what we call shadow IT. They will find ways of sharing documents across their various devices. They will sign up for personal Dropbox accounts. They will use third-party accounting applications if they don't think IT are doing a good enough job with the accounting servers and on the network. They will use their own sales applications and CRM solutions and ERP solutions. Anything that moves faster than what IT can offer or bypasses the restrictions that they think IT are imposing on them and their ability to get their job doing. Now, businesses hate this. Owners of businesses hate this. The shareholders hate this. But this is what's happening. And it's a big fear for these business owners and shareholders that there's going to be accidental or deliberate leakage of data and that regulatory compliance is being eroded. There may be controls saying, listen, data is not supposed to leave a secure network. We're not supposed to have credit card or social security numbers leaving our network. But this stuff, well, thanks to the cloud, it's possible for people to move these files around. And scarily, they can do that to leak it to the media, to leak it to competitors, or to steal that information when they're leaving the company and bring it to a competitor when they join that company. So take a price list or recipe list from a pharmaceutical company, put it in our Dropbox, and then join a rival company and have free access to all that sensitive intellectual property. Trying to ban the cloud? Well, you better start disabling internet access and disabling mobile phone signals and all that good stuff, because that's the only way you're going to ban the cloud. What we need to do is take control of the cloud. And this is why Microsoft acquired a solution called Cloud App Security, which was recently launched by Microsoft. It's another Israeli acquisition. I believe the company was called Adalon. What we can do with this solution is first detect what cloud solutions our users are using. So that's done by monitoring firewall logs. So we can analyze what applications are being used and detect it from a central point, the firewall. And from there, we can identify, classify, and integrate with up to over 13,000 third-party SaaS applications. So that's a lot of stuff that we can start taking control of. And we can start creating policies. So we might say, you know what, we're not allowing certain data to be allowed into Dropbox. We're not going to allow people to share social security or credit card information from their OneDrive for business or their personal OneDrive. We saw some demos of that at WPC last week. We're now controlling what's being done with these third-party cloud apps, using the functionality that those cloud apps can offer to Microsoft through Cloud App Security. You have a centralized console to view all that usage, document flow, monitor usage, and enforce policies. Cloud App Security is licensed per user. It's available under open licensing and EA, MPSA, and CSP. Right now, it's available by itself. However, in Q4, Microsoft are releasing a new version of EMS called E5. The current version will be rebranded as EMS E3. And the E5 SKU of Enterprise Mobility Security, which will be the upper end SKU, will include a few things like a version of Azure Rights Management Services and Azure AD Premium, but it will also include Cloud App Security. So it will make that E5 SKU very valuable. So we can start monitoring identity using advanced threat analytics, but we can also start taking control of third-party cloud applications using cloud app security. Now we've talked about assets, and one of the big assets is company information, intellectual property, the secrets, the documents, the information that the company is generating and storing and recording that we don't want to get out to the media, to competitors, to whatever. That stuff, well, data or information is like water, and users are moving this stuff around. Whether we like it or not, they're moving it around. They will find ways to move it, whether it's through personal email access, there's USB sticks, you can do your device locker and stuff like that, so great. They'll Bluetooth it onto their phone or onto their tablet. They have ways and means, and we can try restrict this stuff, but they will always find ways to get stuff out there. Just ask the NSA about a guy called Edward Snowden. He got a lot of stuff out to The Guardian. Now, the solution I'm going to talk about, if the NSA had used it, we wouldn't know who Edward Snowden is. What we do know is legacy solutions just don't work. Disk encryption, great. My documents are encrypted while it's on the laptop. But if I start sending stuff from my laptop to somewhere else, it's no longer encrypted. It's lost its at-rest encryption. Or we have personal usage of devices. We had a story recently here in Ireland where a government employee, a senior advisor to a minister, was using a laptop. Now, luckily it was a government laptop, so it was encrypted, but if it was a personal laptop, which he was entitled to use, he wouldn't have necessarily had disk encryption, and the sensitive information that was stored on that laptop would have been released out to the wild, and that would have caused serious problems. Turned out had a lot of personal financial information about government employees. What we need to do is secure documents and emails. And we can do that using a service that will be known soon as Azure Information Protection. Currently it's known as Azure Rights Management Services, or Azure RMS. Azure Information Protection allows us to start controlling security at the document and the email level. So encrypt that document, that email, so only authorized people can use it. And we can even control what they can do with it. Can they edit it? Can they print it? Can they forward that email? We have complete control over that, and we can also monitor and track and report on usage of those documents and emails, because it's all being managed on the back end by Azure. That's why it's called Azure Information Protection. You know, you don't need an Azure subscription for this. It's a completely independent service, but it's all powered by Azure. There's going to be two SKUs of the solution. The first SKU gives us protection rights, so we can start applying templates that IT or a service provider would create. And we supply those templates to our end users, so when they're editing an email or a document, they pick a template, and that enforces the security on that document or that email. And then we get the tracking and reporting once they're finished and people start consuming that document or that email. The upper SKU of Azure Information Protection gives us automatic classification. So we can create rules to say, if we see certain types of things in an email or a document, we will suggest a template for securing that document or email. And the user can override that, but it will be audited. So we have complete visibility of what's going on. It's sold right now as Azure Rights Management Services, or Azure RMS, and it is licensed per user. It's available through the usual licensing programs and CSP. It's packaged by itself, so right now you can buy Azure Rights Management Services. In Q4, we will see a change where we will see the new SKU that I talked about with the automatic classification. So in Q4, Rights Management Services will be renamed as Information Protection, and it will have a P1 SKU. The P2 SKU will add the automatic classification. Azure Information Protection also is available in EMS. So right now you can go out and get EMS, and it will be the E3 SKU. The E5 SKU will give you the P2 version of Azure Information Protection. You gotta love licensing. It's lovely and complex. One of our licensing experts is actually tuned in right now. We saw him on the attendees list. If you do have licensing questions, what I would suggest is contact your reseller. If you are a MicroWarehouse customer, contact your account manager in MicroWarehouse, and we can help you out with your licensing as we normally do. So we've talked about some next generation security solutions. They've all been defense type solutions, but what about analysis and monitoring and control? Because this is a big growth area in security right now. We have all these independent solutions that are out there, but there's nothing acting as a supervisor where we have a unified view of everything that's happening. Point solutions, they just don't work together. You think about it, your traditional server deployment right now, you've got firewalls, you've got intrusion detection systems if you're lucky enough to have that sort of budget and those skills. You've got honeypots, you've got antivirus on your servers, antivirus on your PCs, and all these things working independently. So your firewall, for example, seeing a lot of data going out, and your database server is seeing a lot of query activity. And your proxies are seeing, well, data is going from the database server out through the firewall. And every single one of those things by itself is not that interesting. They're things that just happen. But no one notices that there's a problem. Because when we put the whole thing together, what we can figure out is, well, it's unusual. We're seeing a strange flow of data, and we're seeing it going to a strange place. Geez, we've been hacked. And someone's downloading our entire database. If we had a unified view of all of this stuff, then we would understand that we've been hacked, or that we're in the process of being hacked. And this is what Microsoft want to offer us in Azure. And they're giving us a solution called Azure Security Center. Now right now, it's in preview, and it is limited to deployments inside of Azure. But it's a very clever solution. We don't know what the pricing of it is going to be yet, and that hasn't been announced. But what it does is it gathers information from your virtual machines, the various pieces that you've deployed within Azure, and even third-party virtual appliances like a Brocade firewall, stuff like that. So all this data is being sent to Azure Security Center. And Azure Security Center is analyzing what's happening inside of your deployment, but it's also understanding what's happened to other customers' deployments. So you think about the tens of thousands or millions of customers who are also in Azure, and it understands what's happening to Azure as a whole and to Microsoft as a whole, and it's learning from that. In fact, it's using Azure machine learning. So you're talking about artificial intelligence that's analyzing all of this stuff and is able to alert you about various suspicious activities that are happening in your deployment within Azure. Now this solution, you think about it, if Microsoft were to extend this using OMS, for example, we could start deploying this to any deployment anywhere. So it would be, okay, I've got stuff running on-premise, I've got stuff running in SunGuard, or I've got stuff running in Telecity or Rackspace or Amazon. I could put agents onto that and have that data sent to Azure to be analyzed so I can detect if there's a threat or a vulnerability. If Microsoft was to do that, we would have such an incredible solution from them. But even by itself, contained within Azure, it's going to be something different that we haven't seen yet. There's going to be two SKUs of it. There's going to be a free SKU and a standard SKU. And we do understand that it's going to be licensed on the concept of a node. So a virtual machine would be a node, a collection of Azure SQL databases would be a node and stuff like that. We just don't know what the price of those nodes will be. But even the free solution is going to be pretty interesting. It will also consume Azure Storage, and there'll be a charge for that Azure Storage, but the Azure Storage is really, really cheap. So that's not exactly going to be a big charge. I think even for a small, medium enterprise who's going to deploy some stuff in Azure, the free SKU alone is going to provide them a lot. The standard SKU will give them an incredible amount of information and useful information. That's the important thing, because it's analyzed and it's based on recommendations. And in fact, my deployment is actually giving me recommendations about making security configurations and changes. It's not even just alerts that there's possible attacks or whatever. Now we talked about all document security, email security, and all, and third-party cloud apps and all that stuff. What about your email service? Well, odds are, well, hopefully it is, it's Office 365. There's a few of you still out there with Exchange, I guess. But what we've seen here in Ireland is that Office 365 is the default choice, particularly in the SME sector. Microsoft have done quite a bit in the last year or so to improve what we're getting from email security. So the first thing I want to talk about is ASM, or Advanced Security Management, which was recently announced. Some of you may have seen this on Mary Jo Foley's blog. Advanced Security Management is about protecting your Office 365 installation. It's looking for anomalies and threats and attacks. So for example, we're seeing large amounts of data being downloaded by an individual user. We're seeing lots of repeat logon failures. We're seeing someone log on to Office 365 from a machine in Dublin, Ireland, and then an hour later logging into it from Singapore. So obviously that's an impossible login. so we can detect that that's happening and raise an alert and investigate what's going on with that user. And if the user is in Dublin and they haven't RDP'd into something in Singapore, well, we know there's a problem that their identity has been stolen. We also get some advanced stuff that we can start doing. So we can create these policies to start looking for logins from risky IP addresses, admin rights being granted to people, and we can even automatically suspend a user account if we see enough suspicious activity going on with that account. Careful with that one if it's your CEO. You might find yourself being out of a job or getting an angry call from Hong Kong at 2 o'clock in the morning if they're off on a jolly. So there's a lot of information that that thing is able to give you, and there's a lot of stuff it's going to be able to do. It's available in the E5 SKU of Office 365, but you can purchase it as a per-user add-on to the other enterprise plans as well. We get antivirus scanning with Office 365, and that's your regular antivirus scanning. Think about what malware scanning does. It's looking for known threats. Now, if you've dealt with CryptoLocker, you will understand what a zero-day attack is, because CryptoLocker is driven by the zero-day business. There are hundreds, if not thousands, of variants of CryptoLocker coming out every day. And these are new variants that have never been seen before. And CryptoLocker is very craftily written, the way it evolves and changes and encrypts itself and randomizes a lot of its code. So it's very difficult to identify. And with these new releases every day, the malware companies aren't able to keep up. The malware companies can only detect previously detected malware. So by the time it arrives on your network and is detected and identified, it's already done the damage. So having your typical email scanning going on is just not enough for these sorts of attacks. You think about it, this stuff is coming in as a PDF that comes into your accounts department. Accounts department sees something called invoice.pdf, they open it up, and next thing you know, CryptoLocker's gone wild on your network. And I heard via Twitter this week from one of our customers that they had a customer who even saw CryptoLocker encrypt their sysfile folder. Now luckily they working backups of all their virtual machines and did a restore, but that business lost a day of data. So that cost them money. And they were lucky they didn't have to pay the ransom in Bitcoin to some organization in Estonia or Lithuania or wherever it is. And I've heard stories even of the release keys not working and then having to pay a second time to get a valid release key for CryptoLocker. So what we need to do is start scanning for zero-day attacks. So how do you do that? Well, that's something called Advanced Threat Protection. Microsoft offer that in Exchange Online Advanced Threat Protection, or ATP, which is included in the E5 SKU of Office 365, but again, you can add it on a per-user basis to the other plans. And this works in conjunction with your antivirus scanning. And what it does is, when it comes across something that it's not quite sure of, it will send that off to what's called a detonation chamber. Basically a virtual machine. I love the term detonation chamber. It sounds so, what was the name of that movie? Hurt Locker? Yeah, it sounds very Hurt Locker. I'm going to stick this email into a detonation chamber. And basically what they're doing, and you see this from other companies like WatchGuard who do similar things as well on their universal threat protection devices. They're putting this malware into basically a virtual machine. And they're doing all sorts of funny things to it, like they'll accelerate time, they'll poke and prod it, they'll run it, they'll open it, and they're scanning the environment in the virtual machine around the malware. It's pointless scanning the malware or the suspected malware. They're scanning the environment around it to see if it does anything. Is it going to change system files? Is it going to reach out to the registry? And do stuff that a PDF or a Word document or whatever it is shouldn't really be able to do. And if it sees something happen, alerts go off, the thing is binned, and you've protected the customer or your business from that zero-day threat. And this is how your CryptoLockers and all those things can be prevented from getting in. This is the stuff that your typical firewall and your typical antivirus just cannot do. And Microsoft will stop it before it even gets to the inbox. Now there's some more traditional type solutions that if you're in an industry that needs to be regulatory compliant, solicitors, accountants, pharmaceutical, medical, whatever, there's some certain things out there that you may have in your Office 365 deployment, or if you stepped up your Office 365 deployment, you would get these solutions and they solve these genuine business problems. So we have data loss prevention, or DLP. So this ability to create policies to say, there's certain types of data that we just do not want to be seeing shared on OneDrive or SharePoint or whatever, and we want to control that. We want to prevent unwanted operations from happening with social security numbers, credit card numbers, all that good stuff. So we can implement those policies using Office 365 Pro Plus or E3 or E5. These features are built in there, and it surprises me every day, and I saw this yesterday with a experienced Office 365 partner where they just did not know that this was available. And the other feature as well is compliance stuff, which we have in the E1, E3, and E5 SKUs of Office 365. And this is available for Exchange, SharePoint, and OneDrive, where we can enable archiving, legal hold, auditing, and e-discovery. So the ability to keep stuff permanently or for a long time, so we can delve into it after the fact. So if there's a legal investigation or we have to investigate suspicious behavior by an employee or an ex-employee, we can actually delve in for that information and easily find it or search for it. These features are there in the E3 and E5 plans of Office 365, or the E1, E3, and E5 plans, depending on which feature you're talking about. Now, you might say to yourself, well, you know, all this sounds great, but it's just too expensive for me and my customers. I can't afford this. I can't go to the boss and say, you know, we need to do cloud app security, or we need to do ATA, or we need to do this, or we need to do that, or at least we need to look at ATP and protect ourselves from CryptoLocker and all these other zero-day threats. It's just too expensive. Well, I would argue that protecting yourself is not too expensive because being attacked is too expensive. How much is it going to cost to be released from CryptoLocker? I bet you it's going to be a lot cheaper to protect yourself from it. Remember, 74% of UK SMEs were breached in 2015, and that was up from 60% in 2014. It is trending up year after year. Median of 4 breaches per SME, and the average cost of the SME was between 75,000 sterling and 311,000 sterling, and that's up from 65,000 sterling to 115. That upper end went up by nearly 3 times. If you're in the Microsoft partner world, 44% of SMEs increased security spending last year. That's up from 27% in 2014. So that's a growth business that if you're not participating in it, your competitor is, and potentially they're getting their foot into your customer's door. And you don't like that because if you're in the SME space, you're in the managed service world, and you don't want someone else coming in doing an audit because they always find something in an audit. That's just the nature of the business, what creates customer churn in that business. If you're worried about big CapEx spends, going out and saying, listen, I need to license 50 or 100 users and it's going to cost me this over 3 years and you need to come up with the money straight away, well, most SMEs are going to say no. Instead, go with the drip feed model. Per month billing, which you get through CSP. So if you're a customer, talk to your resellers about this. If you're a reseller, talk to your distributor like MicroWarehouse about this. It's a no CapEx model, so the customer's paying a small amount every month. It's a true cloud model. There's no long-term commitment. There's no 3-year contracts or any of this stuff. It is literally month to month based on usage. So if I want to protect myself for 50 users this month, I pay the money for this month and I get my protection for that month. If I don't want to do it next month, don't pay anything. And my commitment to that service is over. Partners can then buy that from the distributors and then sell that on to their customer and put their margin on top of it, or wrap it up in a managed service or whatever. And if you're in Ireland or Northern Ireland, talk to MicroWarehouse and we can tell you a lot more about CSP and give you pricing for these solutions as well. It'll be cheaper than the RRPs that you'll see out there as well, or cheaper than open. So there's a lot of stuff we covered there. Keep an eye on learn.mwh.ie for future webinars. We've already scheduled our next one. If you are on mail lists from MicroWarehouse, take us off your junk mail filter, because we find a lot of people come to us after the fact and say, oh, we didn't realize you were running such and such event. And then we ask them to look in their junk mail and they find the announcement in there. You can follow us on @MWH Distribution. John isn't too noisy on Twitter. He doesn't tweet too much, so if there's any events going on, you will find out about them through there. Our next webinar is on August 4th. So on August 4th, same bat time, same bat channel, we will be talking about affordable Hyper-V clustering for the small, medium enterprise and the branch office. So big multinationals who have lots of branch offices, maybe they're struggling with the cost of Hyper-V clustering. We can offer you a solution to bring that down. It's software plus hardware. You may already be guessing what I'm talking about if you were paying attention earlier on. So tune in on August 4th. We'll reduce the cost of Hyper-V clustering for you in the SME world and in the branch office world. And you can learn more about that on learn.mwh.ie. The registration page is already up and running.
I've just put the link up there on the chat box.
And the link apparently is on the chat box. John has just posted it. Excuse me. Do we have any questions, John? Excuse me. Quick coffee today. Questions? Seem to have lost sound, apparently, someone is saying. Oh, crisis averse. Screen, I'm looking for new questions. Josh Roundtree. For cloud app security to be affected, it seems all traffic has to go through the firewalls. How do you force that upon the mobile workforce? That's a good question. So we can also use a feature of Azure AD Premium. So the firewall's role is detection of the cloud app services. We can also manage them even if we don't discover them through the firewall, obviously. So Azure AD Premium gives us another way of discovering cloud app usage, which is it distributes agents onto machines. So if you're managing those agents or those machines using Intune or whatever, you can distribute those devices out there. So if people are enrolling their personal devices so they can get access to things like Office and stuff like that through the company. You can also push out the Cloud App Discovery Agent, and that will report back information into Cloud App Security where you can run reports and you can get full analysis of what applications are being used by people as well. So it gives you quite a bit of information. So there's multiple ways we can actually gather this information, Josh. Mark Ringo, how does Grid Store compare to offerings like Dell Vertex? Also hardware support maintenance. So on the logistics side, I'm actually not the best person to talk to. That would be Rob. So if you contact Rob at mwh.ie, that's Rob, R-O-B, at mwh.ie. Rob is probably somewhere chucking something at his monitor. You can ask him about the logistics. As compared to the Vertex, very different kind of solution. So the Grid Store is hyperconverged infrastructure, not really for small, medium enterprise type play or that sort of thing. Grid Store is more akin to what you see from SimpliVity or Nutanix or whatever, but better. Because it's been designed from the ground up to be a Hyper-V solution. It has a much more intelligent way of channeling data to get high availability and resiliency and fault tolerance, and it's all SSD or all flash with a clever way of doing parity to give you a balance between performance and cost affordability. What we do have comparing against the Vertex would be from Data On, the cluster in a box solutions. And in terms of price and performance, beat the absolute holy, insert whatever term you want into there, of the Dell Vertex. It'll beat it on price, it'll beat it on performance, every which way. Vertex is taking concepts from the 1990s and trying to combine them into a solution for the 2016s. Whereas what you see from Data On is software defined with high performance components, 12 gig SAS, 10 gig networking between the nodes, so even if you don't have a 10 gig switch, we can still live migrate virtual machines at 10 gig speeds. And it's combining SSD and HDD storage, so you're getting cost affordability from the HDD storage, and we're getting high-speed performance from the SSD, and it still comes in cheaper than what Dell will offer. In fact, I priced up a Compete yesterday, and we were coming in at about 1/3 less than a Dell offering, but with better performance. So, Mark, that's how we can beat up Dell. I enjoy beating up Dell or HPE. It's great fun. Any more questions for anyone? If anyone has any questions, just fire them into the questions window and I will do my best. No more questions? Okay. I think we'll wrap it up there and let everyone get on with their afternoon. So thank you once again for tuning in. Really enjoyed doing this stuff, and it was great to see so many of you tune in. Our headcount went up on the first one, which is great to see. Make sure to tune in for the next one, where we will be talking about reducing the costs of Hyper-V, high availability and failover clustering in the SME and the branch office. And we will be we're planning the next ones after that, so there's lots more stuff to cover, as you can imagine. Times are exciting, so if you want to hear about Azure, disaster recovery, online backup, Windows Server 2016, what's happening with Hyper-V, storage, failover clustering, networking, and all that good stuff, we're going to be talking about those things. And we're going to be running these webinars fairly regularly. So far, it looks like we're every 2 weeks. So thank you for tuning in this afternoon, and we'll see you again hopefully in 2 weeks' time. Bye all.